Alright, I know it has been a while since I posted something. However, I do have a good reason. At least in my mind. I was on vacation, and with vacation comes working more when you get back from vacation. So I've been a little busy, honestly. However, you did not come here to listen to reasons or excuses. You came here to learn about tarantulas. I have a disappointment for you because today we will not be learning about tarantulas. We will be learning about feeders. Appropriate feeders to give tarantulas. Let's jump right in. In this episode, we're going to go over three main categories of feeders, things to consider about them, and also things to avoid later on in the episode. We are going to start off with by far the most common feeder in this hobby and the reptile hobby, crickets. They are very accessible, they're very inexpensive, at least in the short run, and just about every pet store carries them. I don't think I've ever walked into a pet store and not seen crickets for sale. They tend to go for about 10 cents each for a large and much less for the smalls. However, buying in wholesale online is a lot cheaper. However, they do come with a few downsides. Convenience has a cost. They die pretty easily. Back when I lived in Nebraska and I bought them from a pet store, I actually had to put them in my coat when it was snowing outside just to get to the car so they didn't die on the way. Very fragile things. I've even spoken about using them as guinea pigs to see if it'll kill your tarantula by exposing it to the cricket. Very fragile. They also smell god-awful if you have a good amount of them. If you have more than 10 or 20 in an enclosure keeping them, they smell so bad. And on top of the smell, they also chirp. They're crickets, they chirp. They're just assaulting to all the senses, honestly. One of the biggest reasons I personally don't like them, however, is that while they do come very small enough for any sling, they don't come very large. Even the largest crickets you can get are a snack for some of the larger tarantulas. I'm not even talking about bird eaters. Some of the smaller, large tarantulas, it's a snack for them, so I'm not a big fan of them in that regard. On top of them not being very large for any tarantula, they're just not very nutritious. Yes, a tarantula can live from sling all the way up through death by eating nothing but crickets. However, you could do the same thing at McDonald's, but it doesn't mean that it's a good thing to do. You see, tarantulas can only eat liquid. That's their only method of eating. They can't chew. So that being said, crickets aren't very meaty. You're going to hear me use that term a lot in this episode. They're not very meaty. If you actually cut one in half, you'll see it's mostly that hard exoskeleton, which is completely inedible to tarantulas. Different story with other pets, but for tarantulas, it's garbage. So you're going to find that you will have to feed more of them to fatten up a tarantula. That being said, pretty low protein density, pretty low fat density. I'm just not a fan of them. While I can't speak from experience, I have read and I have seen that breeding them is a hassle and it's difficult. They are extremely cannibalistic if there's no food available, or even if they're stressed or they're bored or anything, you breathe on them too heavy, they start eating each other. It's ridiculous. And on top of that, they smell. So if you're going to breed them, have them off in their own room. They smell just terrible. Again, they're cheap to begin with, and frankly, I do recommend them to every beginner. Every pet store sells them, so stick with them. However, once your collection starts to grow, perhaps look into something else like what I'm about to show you. Another very common one would be the worms. Waxworms, mealworms, superworms, hornworms, butterworms. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but you get the idea. None of them are actually worms. Nothing I just listed off as an actual worm. They are all larvae, some of moths, but many of them of beetles, which I will get back to here in a moment. Now, the worms can be kept in a multitude of ways. Sometimes you can just put them in sawdust and they live that way. Some of them can be kept in the fridge and kept alive for months and months on end. Some of them have a short lifespan, so whatever is available to you, whatever you're able to buy, do some quick research online. Someone will have the answer. I will not be covering individual characteristics in this episode. Their ability to harm a tarantula is actually by far the biggest reason I'm not a fan of worms of any kind. You see, with many of them, they have very strong mandibles, teeth, jaws, however you want to think about it. And because of that, they can bite back. There are stories online of a tarantula munching away at a mealworm while the mealworm was munching right back. So, kind of a downside. And on top of that, they burrow almost immediately, and they can emerge later to harm the tarantula, or emerge as a beetle and once again harm the tarantula. I've covered this before, but just as a reminder, those things do happen. All of those problems, however, are resolved immediately by just crushing the head. That is all you need to do. A huge benefit is that they are high in both protein and fat, very high in those things, and they're very meaty. They have a very thin exoskeleton, some don't have one at all, and very easy for the tarantula to eat at that. I'm actually a fan of these for slings if you cut them up. The typical mealworm that you would buy at Petco, PetSmart, those don't get very large, which is definitely a downside. Even a full-grown G. rosea would have to take on a few of them just to get a full meal. Now, the larger ones like hornworms can get size of my thumb. They can get massive, so different story on those, but the mealworms just don't get too large, so, something to consider. A plus side is they seem to be very easy to breed. Again, no experience in this, but I've read it online in research for this, and they seem very, very straightforward. Two major downsides, though. Number one, they are cannibalistic, just like the crickets, so you need to keep that in mind. Having food available seems to resolve the problem. And number two, the adults, the adult beetles, you can't feed to your tarantulas, so eventually you're going to have an excess of these adult beetles that you can do nothing with. And now here comes the least common feeder, but arguably the best, and what I personally do. Dubias. Roaches. The downsides are they tend to be pretty expensive if you buy them at a pet store, and many pet stores don't carry them at all. You can tend to only find these in exotic pet stores that sell snakes and that kind of pet. However, the positive is that these things are very, very meaty. This is an adult female right here, and she's actually kind of skinny. They are very meaty, they're very high in protein, very high in fat, and if you're breeding your own colony, you get to choose exactly what you feed them. I personally am a big fan of cauliflower because look at the nutritional value of cauliflower. It has a little bit of everything. These things are very high in nutritional value. They're quite meaty. They breed like roaches. They breed very quickly. And above all, they come in a massive variety of sizes. I don't even know if you can see that. That's turning out right now. That is the smallest that they come. This is a newborn, actually. New hatched, however you want to say it. And so even for the smallest slings, I tend to just cut these guys in half and they go to town. So now, why dubias specifically? There are other roaches out there. Why would I choose dubias? Let's see if I can remember the whole list here. They can't fly, even though the males have wings. They can't fly. They have extremely low odor. They have dry feces, meaning their feces is not wet, so it's easy to clean up. They can't jump. They can't climb smooth surfaces. They can't bite the tarantula. They cannot infest your house if they get loose, unless you live in very specific climates. Might want to look into that if you're considering these. What else? I've got to be missing something. Hold on. That was the big hold on. I remember this now. You can make quite a bit of money selling your excess. Even with my decently sized collection, I have a lot of excess roaches. They will absolutely breed quicker than you can feed them off. So what do you do with them? You sell them. In the past 2.5 months, I've made about $600 selling these things on Craigslist. I would recommend doing it. It helps fund this hobby. A quick couple things to note about these guys. They do burrow unless they are mature, a mature female or a mature male. The smaller ones do burrow, however, not very quickly, so you don't need to worry too much unless your spider is picky. Crushing the head or tearing off the front two legs prevents them from burrowing entirely, so you are able to do that. The adult males do have wings. You can see that. Focus. They do have wings. This is an adult male. However, they're vestigial, meaning they are useless. They can't be used for anything. However, they are useful to you. Why are they useful? Because you can do this. You can grab them by the wing and feed them. You can put them on tongs and drop them in. The other ones you end up having to crush the body if you use tongs, but this works out quite well. Also, with the males, they are much scurrier. They run. They run a lot, and they're also pretty quick. So I like feeding these to the big tarantulas because they don't stay still for too long. They do not burrow, so they tend to not stick around too long simply because they get eaten. Another thing I love about these roaches is, like so many roaches, if you get them on their back, they can't flip over, so they end up just kicking their legs wildly, which attracts the tarantula, and they get eaten pretty darn quickly. For the smaller tarantulas, I tend to crush the heads, and they continue to kick after you crush the heads, by the way. I tend to crush the heads just so they don't burrow. It just makes my life easier. If the tarantula ends up not eating the roach, I just pluck it out by the following morning because they will die from that injury pretty quickly. Two other roaches that seem to be pretty popular for feeders are lateralis, the lats, and hissers. I actually don't know the scientific name for them. They've got their own downsides. I'll let you research that on your own. However, in terms of comparing them to Dubia, Dubias excel in everything that they fall short in. To me, it's not even a debate. The biggest thing is that the lats can actually infest your house, so don't do those, in my opinion. They're a terrible feeder just for that reason. So we spoke about the feeders to look for. Now let's talk about the feeders to avoid. Now, some people can debate these, but I'm going to give just bullet points as to why they're terrible feeders. You never want to feed anything that you caught in the wild. I don't care if it's a roach, if it's a cricket, a mealworm, whatever. Don't feed anything that you caught in the wild for a couple of reasons. First off, they can have parasites that may be transferred to your tarantula, and more commonly, they could be carrying pesticides. Just about everyone and their grandmother sprays pesticides around their house, and chances are these creatures came in contact with those pesticides that you are then feeding to your tarantulas. Bad plan. This gets brought up a lot for some reason. Fish. You can feed a fish to a tarantula, but the smell, good God, that would smell absolutely terrible. That's up to you if you want to deal with that. Feeding your tarantula any form of mammal, usually mice, is a hotly debated topic in this hobby. Number one, for ethical reasons, but I will leave that to the philosophers. It's a terrible feeder for, number one, the smell, because they mold and get septic very, very quickly. Even while the tarantula is still eating them, they're mammals, they rot quickly. And more importantly, they can fight back unless you buy a pinky mouse. I still don't advocate for that. Once the mouse has fangs, once the mouse has teeth, they can bite back and cause a lot of damage, possibly fatal damage, to the tarantula. There is no reason ever to feed a tarantula a mouse or hamster or any mammal. It's a bad idea, and if you do it, frankly, you are just trying to show off, hey, I got a big spider. Yeah, I'm calling you out on that. It's a bad plan. Lastly, it is very common when keeping exotic pets to buy that calcium powder stuff. I used to do that when I kept leopard geckos. Don't do that with tarantulas. Not only is it unneeded, but there are theories that it's actually harmful. So never, ever, ever get the calcium shake. You don't need to get any kind of shake whatsoever. Just feed the feeders. That's it. At the most, you can gut load the feeders, but even that's debatable as to how beneficial it is. Alright, episode's over at this point. You can turn off if you want. However, I am very excited about something, so I'm going to talk about it. Actually excited about two things. First off, those two enclosures right there, I've got a female P. striata in that one, and an adult male P. striata in that one. Guess what's going to happen? I'm going to wait a couple weeks, get her a good meal, fatten her up a bit, try and do the same with him if he even takes food, and we're going to go for it. I will try and make a video about it. However, that genus tends to take their time mating, so don't hold your breath on that one. A genus that does not take their time, however, would be the green bottle blues. I have got a mature female and a mature male, and we're going to try breeding them. I'm a little worried because if you don't know, green bottle blues tend to be, let's say they have dinner dates. They're infamous for eating the males, so I'm worried about that. But we're going to try our best and see what happens. I will actually be doing that on Friday, this coming Friday, so 2 days from now, certainly, and I will be making a video about it, so wish me luck. Alright, we're actually done at this point. I want to give a huge shout out to Louise F. over at Arachnoboards and here on YouTube. Check out her channel. Yeah, overlay, right? Check out her channel. She has some amazing videos, and she has helped me quite a bit getting ready for pairing both of these. She just had a successful pairing of green bottle blues herself, so she was able to throw some advice my way. And that's actually it. Hope you walked away learning something about these feeders. If you have any questions, want more specifics on any of them, as always, feel free to ask in the comments. As always, I've been EulersK, this has been Iraniade, and thank you once again for watching.
Bye-bye.